Hello, I am Dr. Norma Jones, and this is Chapter 4, Adapting to Audiences and Situations and Ethics. Learning Outcomes. By the end of this chapter, you will be able to define audience, describe how audience demographics shape communication, consider strategies for adapting messages to diverse audiences, apply a personality frameworks to analyze audiences, address communication for ethical considerations. Introduction. Effective public speaking begins with understanding your audience. This chapter explores how demographics and psychographics details can influence how messages are received. It also highlights the role of ethics and DEIAB plus principles in shaping respectful, inclusive communication. By learning to analyze and adapt to your audience, you will be better prepared to create speeches that connect across differences and build trust. Audience analysis and adaptation. Audiences can be defined as the group of people who receive, interpret, and respond to a speaker's message. Audiences are at the center of public speaking. They shape not only how a message is received, but also how it is delivered in the moment. Audience analysis, the process of gathering and interpreting information about listeners, helps speakers adapt their content and delivery to be more effective. By considering demographic and situational factors together, speakers can design messages that connect meaningfully, avoid stereotyping, and meet audience expectations. Audience analysis is the process of gathering and interpreting information about the people who will hear and hopefully listen to your message. This builds on the brief overview of audience-centered persuasion strategies from a previous chapter. In this class, we will not conduct formal research, but will review general understandings of them as we deliver speeches to our classmates in class or to your chosen audience online. Demographic analysis and adaptation. Demographic analysis examines the observable characteristics of the audience, including age, gender, marital status, education, religion, cultural background, disabilities, and socioeconomic status. To focus more closely, speakers may consider a few of these in detail. While demographic categories are helpful, they can easily slip into stereotypes if treated too rigidly, so speakers must be careful and use them as broad-based guides rather than assumptions. Let's review some of these demographics. Age is not just a number. Instead, it reflects shared experiences, generational values, and common reference points that shape how people interpret messages. A generation is grouped at about 15 to 20 years with shared experiences. For example, some generations include baby boomers, born 1946 to 1964, may share memories of the moon landing or the civil rights movement. When speaking to them, speakers might connect through references to civic duty, historical milestones, and perseverance. Generation X, born 1965 to 1980, may recall the Cold War's end, the Challenger explosion, and the rise of personal computers. They often appreciate practical examples, balanced skepticism, and straightforward communication. Millennials, born 1980 to 1996, may share the rise of social media and 9/11. They may value collaboration, diversity, and references to technology or global awareness in speeches. Gen Z, born 1997 to 2010, may share experiences of growing up with smartphones, school lockdown drills, and climate change debates. They tend to respond well to interactive elements, visual media, and authenticity from speakers. Gen Alpha, born 2011 and 2024, may grow up with AI tools, streaming media as the norm, and early exposure to global issues through digital platforms. For speeches directed toward them in the future, simplicity, multimedia integration, and clear ethical framing will be important. These shared milestones create generational values and reference points that speakers can draw upon. At Antelope Valley College, I once spoke with an adult student returning to school to learn about computers. She explained that she was nervous about learning technology, but wanted to use it to keep in touch with her great-grandchildren. She asked how I learned to use computers because it looked very difficult. I responded that I practically grew up with computers, so there was a different learning curve for me. Our conversation quickly shifted to the many life skills she had developed that I had never learned, such as cooking meals from scratch, making clothes by hand, and managing households without the aid of technology. This exchange illustrates how generational differences are not just gaps, but opportunities to recognize diverse perspectives and strengths. In many speaking situations, you may encounter audiences that include multiple age groups at the same time. Effective speakers address this span by blending examples that resonate with different generations, explaining references that may not be universally shared, and highlighting values such as family, perseverance, or community that transcend age groups. For example, a speech on music could include references to artists across various ages, such as the Beatles, Nirvana, and Billie Eilish, so that each generation has a touch point, while also highlighting the broad role of music in expressing identity and emotion. From there, let's explore gender, marital status, education, religion, cultural background, disabilities, and socioeconomic status. Gender can influence communication experiences and expectations. Like age, it reflects more than just a simple category. It involves shared experiences, societal expectations, and identities. For example, audience members may view a message differently based on the gender roles they were raised with, the identities they hold, or the inclusivity of language. For example, in my high school calculus class on day 1, my teacher told the class that all the girls should get out if they just wanted to be housewives. This statement was harmful because it reinforced gender stereotypes, discouraged us students from pursuing mathematics, and excluded us from participation. In public speaking, similar assumptions can alienate parts of an audience, undermine trust, and damage credibility. This experience highlights how assumptions based on gender can create disconnects between what the speaker intends and what the listener delivers, and why speakers must avoid projecting stereotypes onto their audiences, no matter the intent. Gender is not always fixed or binary. Many people experience gender as fluid across time or context. Effective speakers recognize this diversity by avoiding assumptions and by using language that allows people to define themselves. For instance, inviting audience members to share their pronouns when appropriate can create a more inclusive environment. Similarly, sharing examples of leaders from diverse gender identities can help audiences feel represented and respected. Inclusive speakers avoid stereotypes and use gender-neutral language, acknowledging and respecting non-binary and transgender identities as well. Marital status can influence audience perspectives, but it is important to treat it broadly rather than assume specific lifestyles. Relationship experiences may affect how audiences connect with examples, priorities, and values. Effective speakers avoid making assumptions about whether someone is single, partnered, or married, but remain mindful that family responsibilities, independence, or other commitments can shape how messages are received. For example, when giving a speech on time management, a speaker might acknowledge that some listeners balance family responsibilities while others focus on school or work obligations. This approach avoids assumptions while showing awareness that relationship context can shape experiences. Gender and marital status together can intersect in shaping perspectives. For example, communication about workplace balance may be heard differently by someone balancing cultural expectations of gender roles within a marriage compared to someone who is single. Recognizing these intersections without stereotyping helps speakers adapt in ways that respect the full diversity of experiences in the audience. Educational experiences shape what knowledge base an audience brings to the topic. Technical or academic terms may be suitable for audiences with training in those fields, while simpler explanations are more effective for those without that background. It is not about too much or too little education, but about what kind of expertise or skills are present. For example, my doctorate is in communication, which equips me to discuss messages and audiences, but I am not qualified to provide guidance on physical or mental health issues. Speakers should always consider the differences and similarities in their audiences and their own knowledge areas. Religious identity and practices may shape audience perspectives on ethics, values, and appropriate examples. For example, using religious holidays or symbols and illustrations may connect with some listeners, while alienating others if not handled respectfully. A speaker discussing the importance of community service might use examples from volunteer projects at local centers of worship. While this can create strong connection for listeners who share that background, it may feel exclusive to those from different or non-religious perspectives. Effective speakers broaden their examples to include multiple traditions or frame them in a way that emphasizes universal values like generosity and community care. Cultural backgrounds include the customs, traditions, and values that shape how messages are interpreted. A phrase or example that is familiar in one culture may confuse or even offend in another. For example, humility is highly valued in many Asian cultures. I grew up hearing my mother and grandmother reminding everyone not to brag, which gave me what I call terminal humility. As a result, when I give talks, I often use self-deprecating humor, especially if I am introduced as an expert. This is culturally appropriate in many Asian contexts, but in the United States, it can sometimes be interpreted as imposter syndrome or a lack of confidence. This illustrates how cultural expectations influence interpretation and why speakers must consider different norms. Disability can also shape audience experiences. Some individuals may face physical, sensory, cognitive, or learning differences that affect how they receive and process messages. Effective speakers use accessible language, provide clear visuals with descriptions, and remain mindful of pacing and delivery. For example, including captions or transcripts supports audiences who are deaf or hard of hearing, while describing images aloud helps those with low vision. Also, here at AVC, I facilitate workshops on AI through the Learning Center. I changed the name of one of my workshops from the AI Doctor is In, Hands-on Practical Tips for Better AI Use workshop to the AI Doctor is In, Practical Tips for Better AI Use to reflect less ableist language. Considering accessibility needs ensures that messages are inclusive and respectful of all listeners. Socioeconomic status includes how income level, occupation, and financial background affect interests, priorities, and access to resources. For instance, a speech on technology use in education should consider that not all audiences may have equal access to high-speed internet or expensive devices. Going back to my AI workshops, I show people both the free and subscription tools. This is because I cannot assume everyone has access to technology and resources. At the same time, I caution teachers against using AI detectors because they often create barriers to access and equity. For example, a student shared that a false positive from a detector made them fearful of exploring AI tools at all. This also highlights how access to better models and proper training makes a difference. Those with time and money to invest in subscription-only tools are often positioned to outperform free models. Conversely, those without such access may be falsely accused. By shifting the focus to training and guidance instead of punishment, that student became more confident in using AI ethically and responsibly. Instead of relying on unreliable detection tools, I encourage teachers to focus on training students in responsible and ethical AI use. Access to AI tools and guidance on how to apply them effectively in communication supports learning far more than punishment through flawed detection systems. Demographic factors provide useful insights into audiences, but they must always be approached with care to avoid stereotypes. Instead of treating age, gender, marital status, education, religion, culture, disability, or socioeconomic status as labels, effective speakers use them as rough guidelines for understanding shared experiences and potential perspectives. Psychographic analysis and adaptation. Psychographic analysis goes deeper than visible demographics by considering beliefs, values, attitudes, lifestyles, and interests. While demographics tell us who the audience is, psychographics address why they think and act the way they do. This kind of information can be more difficult to access since values and motivations are not always visible on the surface and often require surveys, interviews, or careful observation to uncover. For example, two groups may share the same age and education level, but one may value environmental sustainability while another prioritizes economic growth. Psychographic factors can include political orientation, hobbies, consumer behaviors, or religious commitments that shape worldviews. Personality frameworks such as the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, MBTI, can be used as one tool for understanding communication preferences. The Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, MBTI, is a psychological tool that categorizes individuals into 16 personality types based on preferences in how they perceive the world and make decisions. While it has been widely used in organizational and educational settings to foster better communication and teamwork, it is not without controversy, as some critics question its scientific validity and reliability. However, the MBTI can still serve as a helpful framework for understanding audience preferences and tailoring communication styles accordingly. The Myers-Briggs highlights 4 broad areas. We will explore each of them as they relate to informative and persuasive speeches. Extroversion versus introversion. This category reflects how individuals gain energy and interact with the world, shaping how they engage with speeches and presentations. Extroverts, E, draw energy from social interaction and are often enthusiastic and talkative, while introverts, I, recharge through solitude and prefer thoughtful reflection before speaking. Understanding whether your audience tends to be more extroverted or introverted can guide your speech structure and engagement strategies. For example, extroverted audiences may enjoy interactive elements such as Q&A sessions, group discussions, or live polling, which can foster active participation. In contrast, introverted audiences may appreciate structured presentations that allow time for individual reflection and clear transitions between points. In persuasive speeches, engaging extroverts may involve open discussion and calls for action. In contrast, introverts may be persuaded by well-organized logical arguments with moments for silent reflection or takeaway messages that allow further consideration. For informative speeches, extroverts may respond well to a dynamic delivery style, incorporating audience involvement. At the same time, introverts may engage more with concise, clearly organized content delivered at a steady pace. By recognizing the energy dynamics at play, speakers can adapt their approach to create an inclusive environment where both extroverted and introverted audience members feel comfortable and engaged. Sensing versus intuition. This category reflects how individuals gather information and perceive their environment. Sensing types, S, focus on concrete facts, details, and past experiences, preferring step-by-step explanations with real-world examples. In contrast, intuition types, N, prefer abstract ideas, patterns, and future possibilities, often engaging with conceptual frameworks and visionary statements. Understanding whether your audience favors concrete details or conceptual ideas helps tailor the content to their preferences. For example, in persuasive speeches, sensing audiences may be more influenced by tangible evidence and case studies, while intuitive audiences may respond to big picture narratives and hypothetical scenarios. Sensing audiences may appreciate clear, methodical explanations and informative speeches, while intuitive audiences may connect with innovative presentations that emphasize overarching themes. By recognizing how audience members gather information, speakers can create presentations that resonate with diverse cognitive styles, ensuring clarity and engagement for all listeners. Thinking versus feeling. This category reflects how individuals make decisions and approach arguments. Thinking types, T, prioritize logic, objectivity, and consistency when evaluating information, often favoring structured arguments supported by facts and data. On the other hand, feeling types, F, place greater value on empathy, harmony, and personal connections, responding to messages that appeal to shared values and emotions. Understanding how your audience makes decisions can significantly impact the design of both informative and persuasive speeches. For example, in persuasive speeches, statistics and case studies may be effective for thinking types who are persuaded by consistency and logical coherence. In contrast, feeling types may be more influenced by narratives that convey empathy and personal stakes, making emotional storytelling and appeals to shared goals powerful tools for connection. For informative speeches, thinking audiences may appreciate clear, analytical explanations of processes and quantitative data, making it essential to include charts, evidence, and logical flow. Feeling audiences may resonate more with stories that highlight human impact, emotional appeals, and inclusive language that fosters a sense of belonging. By recognizing the different ways audiences process information, speakers can adapt their approach to balance logical reasoning and emotional resonance, ensuring a message that effectively reaches both thinkers and feelers. Judging versus perceiving. This category reflects how individuals approach structure and decision-making. Judging types J prefer structure, detailed plans, and clear conclusions. They are comfortable with predictability and timelines and often appreciate a defined framework for speeches. In contrast, perceiving types P value flexibility, spontaneity, and exploration. They thrive in environments where ideas can flow freely and prefer presentations that allow for open-ended discussions. Understanding this preference helps speakers decide whether to stick to a structured outline or allow room for audience-driven exploration. For example, in persuasive speeches, judging audiences may respond well to arguments that build steadily toward a clear call to action. In contrast, perceiving audiences may appreciate a more adaptable approach that acknowledges alternative viewpoints and leads to a flexible conclusion. In informative speeches, judging audiences may prefer clear objectives and defined takeaways with a linear structure, while perceiving audiences may enjoy discussions that explore multiple perspectives and allow for tangential insights. By identifying the need for either structure or flexibility, speakers can tailor their presentations to engage their audience effectively, creating an experience that resonates with both judging and perceiving preferences. When applying the MBTI to audience analysis, it is essential to remember that personality preferences provide insights rather than rigid classifications. Audience members may display different preferences depending on the context. Avoid making assumptions about individuals based solely on their perceived type, and instead use the MBTI as one of many tools to tailor your message effectively. Even if specific test results are not available for individual audience members, covering a broad range of preferences can help ensure that speeches resonate with a wider and more diverse audience, enhancing overall engagement and connection. In other words, consider how to engage audiences across the different personality types. Just because something appeals or resonates with you, it does not mean that that same thing will resonate or appeal to everyone. By understanding these personality dimensions, speakers can create speeches that resonate with their audience's logical and emotional needs, fostering deeper connections and increasing the impact of their message. Next, let's look at different situational factors. Situational analysis and adaptation. Audiences do not exist in a vacuum. Instead, situational factors interact with the audience's demographics, preferences, and cultural backgrounds. Understanding this interplay helps speakers anticipate how external contexts influence audiences. When preparing and delivering a speech, speakers must consider 4 key situational factors that can significantly impact the success of their message: time, location, audience size, purpose, and knowledge. Time, the timing of the presentation influences audience engagement and comprehension. Morning audiences may require an energetic introduction with examples that capture their interest and help them overcome morning sluggishness. Conversely, afternoon audiences, particularly after lunch, may appreciate a format that breaks up the content, such as interactive activities or visual aids, to maintain focus. Additionally, the speech's overall duration should align with the audience's attention span to avoid information overload or boredom. In a 6 to 7 minute speech, it is crucial to focus on the topic with 3 main points and adequate support. The speech should also use a clear introduction, concise body, and impactful conclusion. Keeping transitions seamless and pacing steady ensures the brief time frame is used effectively without feeling rushed. Also, although the speech is short, previews and reviews will help keep the audience oriented. Location. The location or setting of the event shapes how messages are received. Speakers may need microphones, projectors, and large font slides in large auditoriums to ensure clarity and accessibility for all participants. In contrast, smaller, intimate spaces such as classrooms may allow for a more conversational tone, fostering direct engagement with audience members. Recorded speeches, whether asynchronous lectures or pre-recorded speeches, require an emphasis on clarity, pacing, and uncluttered visual environments, as viewers can easily become distracted in remote settings. In virtual settings, maintaining consistent eye contact through the camera, clear audio quality, and minimizing visual distractions are key to keeping the audience connected. Audience size. The size of the audience dictates the level and format of engagement. For smaller groups, such as classroom settings, speakers can foster discussions, solicit direct feedback, and create personalized exchanges. However, in our classroom, speeches will be 6 to 7 minutes long and will not include interactive elements such as group discussions or Q&A. Instead, each speaker's goal is to deliver an engaging, well-structured presentation within this time frame. Roundtable discussions and informal Q&A may still be effective formats in other contexts, promoting a collaborative learning atmosphere. For larger classrooms or lecture halls, maintaining structure is essential to keep information flow organized and avoid distractions. Incorporating strategies such as polls, breakout activities, or structured question periods can enhance participation without losing time. For general large audiences outside classrooms, techniques such as using prepared Q&A segments or strategically placed discussion pauses can make large events feel interactive and inclusive. Purpose, the event's purpose determines the tone, content, and goals of the speech. A keynote address at a celebratory event calls for inspirational stories, uplifting language, and a motivating conclusion. For example, I was booked to give a keynote. Right before my talk, the area was devastated by the Palisades fire. So I shifted my speech to talk about human resilience using the metaphor of a phoenix. By contrast, an academic presentation at a conference demands thorough research, evidence-based content, and formal delivery. Additionally, audience expectations play a critical role in determining how the message is crafted and delivered. Audience members bring specific expectations based on the event type and speaker context. To meet these expectations, speakers should balance their goals with audience needs, ensuring their delivery resonates both emotionally and intellectually. This can be achieved by incorporating relevant examples, addressing common concerns, and tailoring language and visuals to suit the audience's familiarity and interest level. Knowledge. Audiences vary in what they already know. Anticipating prior knowledge helps the speaker avoid overwhelming listeners with jargon or boring them with overly basic information. For example, explaining basic cell structure to a group of biology majors could bore them. In contrast, using unexplained scientific jargon with a broader and general audience could confuse them. Speakers should strike a balance by assessing the knowledge level and tailoring explanations accordingly. I also ask audiences to indulge me as I explain terms quickly to ensure that we are all on the same page. In a previous chapter, we addressed the relevance of listening and feedback. Situational awareness connects here, since speakers must listen to the cues of the setting, timing, and audience expectations to adjust their approach in real time. For instance, if a speaker notices distracted body language or side conversations, that may be a signal to clarify, add interaction, or adjust pacing. Ethics. Ethics refers to the principles that guide individuals in distinguishing between right and wrong. Ethics encompasses principles such as fairness, honesty, and accountability that help guide decision-making and promote respect for others in interpersonal and public interactions. An ethical framework enables individuals to navigate complex situations by considering the impact of their choices on others and fostering integrity in communication and actions. For example, ethics guide daily actions such as respecting confidentiality in professional settings, avoiding dishonest behavior in academic work, and ensuring honesty when giving peer feedback. These principles extend to everyday experiences like advertising ethics, where truthfulness and transparency matter in marketing messages that influence consumer choices, and to media reporting, where accurate and unbiased information builds trust. They apply in small daily interactions, such as apologizing when making a mistake or for crediting a colleague's contribution, and in larger public scenarios, such as addressing ethical concerns related to politicians' speeches and spreading misinformation. For instance, politicians may use rhetoric that shapes public perception, and ethical concerns arise when information is selectively presented or distorted to influence votes. Misinformation in political campaigns can erode public trust in democratic processes, highlighting the importance of accuracy and accountability in public discourse. With that in mind, let's consider ethics in public speaking. Ethics in public speaking. Ethics are crucial not only for maintaining trust in personal interactions, but also for fostering a just society where human dignity is respected. In public speaking, ethics play a particularly significant role due to the potential influence a speaker has over an audience. Through careful consideration of ethical principles, speakers can contribute to informed dialogue and mutual respect rather than misinformation or harm. The importance of ethics in public speaking becomes clear when considering the power of language to shape beliefs, inspire action, or in some cases, perpetuate injustice. For example, a speaker addressing a public health crisis is responsible for sharing accurate information that can help protect lives. Ethical dilemmas also arise when a politician advocates for policies primarily motivated by personal financial gain rather than public welfare. When leaders use their platforms to mislead or promote legislation for profit rather than the common good, it highlights the profound ethical responsibility to prioritize transparency, fairness, and the public interest. Historical background. When ethical guidelines are ignored, communication can become a vehicle for spreading fear or misinformation, as seen during historical events such as propaganda campaigns that fueled conflict during World War II. Kenneth Burke, a renowned rhetorical scholar, emphasized the importance of understanding rhetoric as a powerful tool that can unify or divide. Burke's concept of the deterministic screen reminds us that the language chosen by those in power can frame realities and influence public perception. During World War II, the Nazi regime's use of dehumanizing rhetoric fueled atrocities like the Holocaust, demonstrating how propaganda can erode ethical boundaries and enable mass violence. In response to the devastation, the post-war world recognized the urgent need for ethical communication. Institutions such as the United Nations were founded to foster dialogue that promotes reconciliation and peace. The Nuremberg trials exemplified the commitment to justice, using public discourse to hold perpetrators accountable and establish truth. These trials set a precedent for ethical rhetoric in confronting injustices and advocating for transparency. Subsequent truth and reconciliation commissions, such as those in South Africa after apartheid, further demonstrated how ethical public discourse can address societal wounds and support collective healing. Ethical principles in speech preparation and delivery. Understanding the ethical principles that guide public speaking involves recognizing key components that contribute to responsible communication. One foundational principle is accuracy, which is the commitment to presenting factual and reliable information. When preparing a speech, a speaker must ensure that the facts presented are correct, up to date, and relevant. And for instance, a speaker discussing climate change must draw from peer-reviewed studies and reputable scientific sources to maintain credibility. Transparency is another critical element. This involves not only citing sources as recommended by public speaking frameworks, but also clearly articulating the purpose behind one's message. A speaker advocating for a policy change, for example, should disclose any affiliations or potential conflicts of interest to maintain the audience's trust. For instance, public discourse surrounding recent political initiatives highlights how transparency can affect public perception of credibility. Plagiarism. An important ethical challenge in public speaking is the avoidance of plagiarism and misinformation. Plagiarism, which involves using another's ideas, words, or intellectual property without proper attribution, undermines both the speaker's integrity and the educational purpose of communication. Plagiarism can take different forms. Direct plagiarism occurs when a speaker copies another person's work word for word without citation, which is unethical and easily identified. For example, reading verbatim from a scholarly article without crediting the author constitutes direct plagiarism. Another example is a speech that includes entire paragraphs copied from an online report without acknowledging the source, misleading the audience into believing the ideas are original. To help, you should cite the source. Also, it helps to summarize or paraphrase with that citation. Mosaic plagiarism happens when a speaker weaves together phrases or ideas from various sources without proper attribution, creating a patchwork of unacknowledged borrowing. For example, a speaker might pull key phrases from multiple articles about climate change and combine them into a paragraph without citing any sources. This creates the impression of originality while masking the true origin of the ideas. Self-plagiarism involves reusing one's previous work, such as repurposing parts of a prior presentation or paper without informing the audience or providing context, which can mislead listeners into believing the material is entirely new. For example, a professor who presents the same research findings at multiple conferences without informing the audience might be engaging in self-plagiarism. To avoid plagiarism, speakers must diligently cite their sources and, when paraphrasing, ensure they capture the original meaning without merely rewording someone else's ideas. Artificial intelligence, AI, has introduced new ethical challenges and opportunities in public speaking. AI tools such as speech generation software and content analyzers can enhance presentations by offering insights, automating certain processes, and generating drafts. However, ethical considerations must be addressed. Speakers must approach AI tools with transparency and responsibility. This means clearly stating when AI tools have been used in research or content creation, such as by including a note in their presentation or speech materials. Disclosing the use of AI builds trust with the audience by demonstrating honesty and openness. Ethical use of AI also involves verifying the accuracy of AI-generated information and cross-referencing with reputable sources to prevent the spread of misinformation. Public speakers must also be mindful of potential biases in AI outputs and work to mitigate any distortions. Ultimately, technology should enhance rather than detract from their commitment to truthful, fair, and inclusive communication. Misinformation. Misinformation is false or inaccurate information. Preventing the spread of misinformation requires careful source evaluation and fact-checking. For example, if a speaker is discussing public health, it is crucial to use data from established medical organizations rather than relying on social media anecdotes. By prioritizing credible sources and double-checking facts, speakers can prevent the spread of harmful inaccuracies that may mislead their audience. Fairness in communication requires presenting information in a balanced way without manipulating the audience's emotions or omitting critical context. For example, when discussing a controversial issue such as economic reform, a speaker should address multiple perspectives rather than framing the topic in a one-sided manner. Respect is also paramount, as ethical speakers must honor the dignity of their audience and the individuals or groups involved in their message. This respect can be demonstrated by avoiding stereotypes, derogatory language, and oversimplifications that fail to capture the complexity of a topic. Building credibility as an ethical speaker. Building credibility is an ongoing process that involves demonstrating competence, character, and care for the audience. This is important because it helps establish trust, reinforces the speaker's authority, and creates a sense of connection with the audience, ensuring that the message is more persuasive and impactful. However, a lack of credibility can undermine communication in both conversations and public speaking. For instance, if a speaker is only accurate 75% of the time, the audience may become skeptical and hesitant to trust future messages, which weakens the speaker's influence. For informative speeches, credibility helps convey facts and details accurately, reassuring the audience of the speaker's reliability. For persuasive speeches, credibility strengthens the speaker's ability to influence beliefs and actions by showing competence, caring, and commitment. Competence refers to the speaker's knowledge and expertise on the subject matter, which can be established through thorough research and preparation. For instance, a speaker at an academic conference should be well versed in current research within their field. In an informative speech, a competent speaker might use accurate statistics from credible sources to enhance understanding, such as providing updated census data during a policy discussion. A speaker demonstrates competence in a persuasive speech by establishing credibility, using strong evidence, connecting emotionally with the audience, structuring arguments effectively, and delivering with confidence and clarity. On the other hand, a lack of competence, such as citing outdated or inaccurate data, can damage credibility and cause the audience to disengage or question the speaker's authority. Character involves demonstrating honesty, integrity, and ethical conduct. This can be achieved by being transparent about one's intentions and avoiding misleading tactics. For example, in an informative speech about climate science, a speaker might openly discuss the limitations of certain studies rather than presenting data selectively. Another good example is a teacher discussing curriculum changes honestly, acknowledging both the benefits and challenges. In contrast, misleading the audience or withholding key facts, such as only sharing favorable survey results or omitting negative feedback, can damage credibility and foster distrust. In persuasive speeches, character is demonstrated when a speaker openly admits the potential drawbacks of their proposal while explaining why the benefits outweigh the concerns. Caring, the final component, refers to showing empathy and a genuine commitment to the audience's understanding and well-being. In an informative speech, a caring speaker might take time to clarify complex information and check for understanding, such as pausing for questions during a lecture on scientific research. In contrast, a lack of care in an informative setting could look like ignoring confused expressions or rushing through technical details without offering clarification. In a persuasive speech, a speaker demonstrating care might adapt their message to acknowledge audience concerns and provide reassurance, such as addressing fears about economic policy impacts with detailed explanations and examples tailored to the audience's context. A bad example of persuasive speaking would be dismissing opposing views without acknowledging their validity or refusing to engage with audience concerns. Speakers who engage with audience questions, acknowledge concerns, and foster open communication demonstrate that they value their listeners' perspectives and build trust across contexts. On the other hand, failing to address audience feedback or using dismissive language can weaken engagement and create distance between the speaker and listeners. Diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility, and belonging, plus DEIAB+. Respect for diverse perspectives is a critical aspect of ethical public speaking. Inclusivity in speech content means selecting examples and language that reflect a range of experiences and identities. A speech about higher education, for instance, should consider the perspectives of students from varied socioeconomic backgrounds, as well as those with disabilities, to ensure that the message resonates broadly and does not inadvertently exclude any group. To understand how these principles function in public speaking, it is helpful to view diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility, and belonging plus DEIAB+ as interconnected aspects of ethical communication. Diversity in public speaking means considering the wide range of identities in the audience, such as race, gender, disability, and socioeconomic background. For example, a speaker discussing healthcare policy could use stories and data that include experiences from marginalized groups to ensure more people feel represented. Failing to do so may lead to an audience feeling overlooked or alienated, Equity involves addressing systemic barriers to ensure all audience members can engage fully, which differs from equality. Equality provides the same resources to everyone, regardless of need, while equity allocates resources and accommodations based on specific requirements to achieve fairness. For example, in public speaking, equality might involve providing all attendees with the same printed handout, whereas equity would include offering the handout in multiple formats, including large print and digital versions for screen readers. In an informative speech, equity ensures that all audience members, including those with disabilities or language differences, have equal access to the presented information. In a persuasive speech, equity means tailoring the message so that it resonates with different audience subgroups, such as providing culturally relevant examples or addressing specific community concerns. Ignoring these accommodations can reinforce inequalities and limit audience participation, reducing both the reach and ethical integrity of the speech. Inclusion means actively creating spaces where all voices are valued and respected. In an informative speech, inclusion might involve pausing for questions to ensure understanding and soliciting feedback to clarify key points. For example, a lecture on environmental science could include case studies relevant to different communities to provide representation and engagement. In persuasive speeches, inclusion can mean addressing potential counterarguments from marginalized perspectives and involving diverse testimonials that support the main claim. Using open-ended questions like, how might this policy affect your community, encourages participation and collaboration. On the contrary, failing to include differing perspectives or overlooking certain groups' concerns can make the presentation seem one-sided or exclusionary, reducing its credibility and impact. Accessibility ensures that content is delivered in ways that individuals of all abilities can understand and engage with. This means considering both physical and digital accessibility to remove barriers. For example, in-person events can provide ASL interpreters, printed summaries, and wheelchair-accessible spaces, while online presentations can offer transcripts, captions, and alternative text for visuals. In informative speeches, accessibility ensures that everyone receives the same core message regardless of ability, such as providing a visual infographic alongside verbal descriptions to aid comprehension. This commitment to accessibility is why all of my videos are captioned, ensuring that participants with hearing impairments can fully engage. In persuasive speeches, accessibility can mean ensuring that emotional appeals and examples are conveyed in a format accessible to all, like using plain language and avoiding overly technical jargon. Without accessible formats and adjustments, individuals with hearing, vision, cognitive, or mobility disabilities may be excluded, undermining the fairness and inclusivity essential to ethical public speaking. Belonging refers to creating an atmosphere where every audience member feels accepted, valued, and respected as an integral part of the group. This concept extends beyond simple participation to fostering a sense of psychological safety and inclusion. In informative speeches, belonging can be reinforced by using inclusive language and recognizing diverse audience backgrounds, such as referencing contributions from various communities. In persuasive speeches, belonging is supported by engaging the audience's lived experiences and inviting collaboration, for example, by including real-life stories that reflect the audience's identities and concerns. Conversely, dismissing feedback, ignoring cultural contexts, or using condescending language can create a sense of exclusion, which weakens the speaker's connection with the audience and diminishes the impact of the message. Each of these aspects, diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility, and belonging, strengthens ethical public speaking by promoting fairness, trust, and meaningful engagement. By integrating DEIAB principles, speakers demonstrate respect for their audiences and create an environment where dialogue and understanding can flourish. I also typically include a plus at the end of DEIAB to acknowledge that there is always room for growth and improvement in and across these areas, as well as new ones. Conclusion. Audience analysis and adaptation are not just tools for crafting stronger speeches. They are commitments to communication that values people and their experiences. When you consider demographics, psychographics in context, while upholding ethics and DEIAB plus practices, you create messages that are both effective and inclusive. These strategies ensure your voice is heard while honoring the diversity of voices in your audience. I am Dr. Norma Jones. Thank you so much for listening to this chapter of Fearless Public Speaking.